Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start off with just a tiny little overview for those of you who aren't current CARIS users. Bathy DataBASE is CARIS's Bathymetric data management solution. It offers relational database storage for coverage data. And by coverage data, I mean digital elevation models, images, cloud data types. As well, in the client application called Base Editor that connects to the database, we have a number of analysis and feature compilation tools relevant to working with geospatial data sources. It's key to point out that Bathy DataBase is a product that's been on the market for over 8 years now and is used in production in many large and small organizations. I'm not going to cover any more introductory information in this webinar, but if you're interested in hearing more about the product or want an overview of the product, you should check out our CARIS website or our social media sites, where a B2B overview webinar we did last year can be accessed. So just to run through the schedule for today, I'll proceed with a slideshow interspersed with a bit of live demonstration. I think it's going to take about 30-35 minutes. We're hoping there'll be a little time at the end to answer some questions. Presenting today is me. I'm Karen Cove, and I'm the product manager for Bathy DataBase. And I have with me Mike Van Duzy, who's our lead developer.
So just before we start, I would like to ask everyone if they could keep their microphones on mute throughout the webinar. And for any questions that you have, please type them into the GoToMeeting dialog. And we'll answer as many as we can towards the end. If we can't get through all the questions during the webinar, we'll be circulating all the questions and answers to all the attendees via email over the next few days.
All right, so we'll try and hit all the BDB 4.1 highlights today. Most of the development of new tools, options, and workflows fall in the areas you see on your screen. So those are the places we're going to hit. All right, so the first area we're going to cover is kind of a hot topic in the hydrographic community right now. It is work we've done to support the idea of making high-resolution raster surfaces to augment traditional charted information available for navigation and other activities. So we really wanted to provide in BDB tools so that it can be used as a production tool for different raster surface products that we hope will be rolling out over the next few years. Raster surface products would cover things like creating bags for exchange between hydrographic organizations, creating 32-bit floating point geotiffs, which is the format often used to make raster surfaces available through web coverage services, creating S102 bathymetric surfaces under S100, and other proposed raster S10X products that will come. Really, any kind of raster product that has to be generated to comply with a certain set of specifications has to be created on some regular schedule and kept up to date. All right, Mike, were you going to do a little demo of the raster product export?
Yeah, so we'll launch Base Editor. All right, so under the export menu, we have our raster product. So this will bring up our new raster product export dialog. Now, for the output, you'll see all the formats that we previously had listed in the file export menu. We've just gathered them all here in this one dialog. But what's really new and interesting is this concept of a product. So Karen previously defined her custom S102 bag product. So let's select that and take a little look to see what pieces are in this. So we can see we have a bag file for the raster data. We have bag metadata and clipping and tiling. Now, if we look under the bag metadata, we can see in Karen's template she has predefined all the metadata values except for this one. So we'll see that what that means just in a minute. And then clipping and tiling, she's defined 1,000-meter square tiles. So by selecting this product, if we want to export, we fill in the output name, we go look at the bag metadata, and we can just type some note. And by doing this, everything turns green and we're ready to go. So we click OK, and this would then go generate a number of smaller bag tiles that I'll stitch together. Now we've already run this, so I'll just close this dialog. I'm going to close the source surface, and we can see in the layers tree we have all these little tiles. Now if I draw one, it's just it's a portion, 1,000 meter square portion of the surface. To make it a little easier to deal with these, I'm going to throw them all into a group. And now I'll add the rest to it. And if I refresh, you can see we have, they're all drawn. We can deal with these many data sets as one entity, which makes it a lot simpler.
All right, let me lay out for you the scenario of how we see these tools working in production. And remember, everything that Mike just did, he did that through the dialog, but you can do it all through our CARIS batch engine as well, which is an important note. So you imagine an organization maintains a Bathy database full of raster and cloud data sets. They run a combine process on those data sets to get a best representation of the area. They export that combined surface out to an exchange format, applying a tiling scheme to slice it up, just like we saw Mike do. They export metadata that complies with a certain set of specifications, serve up the tiles on a web service, and then keep individual tiles up to date as new data is added to the database. We now have tools in BDB to automate this entire process using CARIS Batch and our Python API. And this includes being able to do things like monitoring the database to know when new data has been added and automatically spawning off new combines to run when that happens. We're really looking to have a fully automated workflow. And the other thing to know about how we've kind of built these processes into a single dialog is that we really want to be very easy for us to support new products as they come online. So as there's a new S1OX product, it has a certain metadata profile. Well, it won't be a lot of work for us to just start supporting that metadata profile. And if we had to add new carriers to encode certain products, then we can just add them to the list. So we plan for this one tool to be used to make different products, raster surface products going forward. All right, so a big part of the workflow I just described requires being able to run our surface combine process in batch as part of an automated workflow. So we added this capability in BDB 4.1 for both combine of local data sets and combine of data sets in the database. In this release cycle, we also added the copy join processes to the batch engine, as well as the processes associated with the new raster export, like I just mentioned. There are some new options in the batch tool as well, including the ability to pass URIs instead of dataset names as input files. And that means that we can run the CARIS batch processes, like say the warp process, on both local files and datasets stored in the database. So that's something new. And the other thing we did is we moved all the processes, all the formats supported through the import wizard into CARIS Batch as well.
Now, for this release, the BDB and R&D teams have continued to improve our CARIS Python API. The Python API now offers the ability to read and write CSAR data in addition to the BDB server bindings that we released with 4.0. Now, these new capabilities are offered through the new coverage module. We also have a brand new API documentation page that we'll show you at the end of the presentation. So in addition we also have 2 new plugins that allow access of CSAR data outside of CARIS tools. We have a GDAL plugin that allows reading CSAR raster data in software packages that use the GDAL library, for example, QGIS. We also have a plugin for FME that was released as part of FME 2014. The initial FME plugin supported reading and writing rasters, and we've recently added point cloud reading support to that as well. The new coverage module allows creation of CSAR rasters, reading of CSAR point clouds, reading of CSAR or of the additional raster formats that we currently support in Base Editor, and licensed reading of point clouds and raster data contained in the B2B server. This API is included with both the Base Editor and the B2B server installations. Now, we think that the Python API is going to be a great tool for system integration, as it allows clients to integrate our tools with their software. It allows for scripting of repetitive tasks, and it allows tasks to be scheduled by external schedulers. It also encourages the use of some of our tools and of the B2B or the CSAR format in research by allowing open source tools to use our data, rapid prototyping of new algorithms and processes while taking advantage of the CSAR format for storage.
That sounds good, Mike. On to some more traditional tools. Another area where we made a number of improvements in BDB 4.1 is in the opening, importing, displaying, and exporting of data. Most of these improvements will be available in all CARIS applications, not just BDB, but this is the initial release of many of them. So let's look first at the improved support for opening raster formats and web services. I'll just pop over to the application here, and I just want you to have a little look at the new file open list of supported formats. So you'll see that they're organized differently, and you'll see that there are some new ones in here. So a good example would be the GRIB format is now supported through file open. Our support for web services has also been enhanced to allow users to open OGC compliant services to improve access to data sources and to facilitate the integration of BDB into complex workflows and environments. Support was added for WCS, which is the Web Coverage Service, WMTS, WTMS, and support for our Web Map service has been upgraded to version 1.3. So some big improvements there. As well, we improved our proxy support in this release, allowing it to be a lot easier for people to access these web services through their organization's proxy or firewall, And our support for the last format was upgraded to version 1.3. And we're also supporting the import of LAS or zipped LAS files now. And the bag format has been moved up to version 1.5.2 of that library. So we have some new options as well for controlling the 2D and 3D display. I'm just going to give you one example of each. If you want to see the exhaustive list of everything that's new and improved in BDB 4.1, we suggest you go and check out the changes list where we have every little thing listed. The example in 3D is that you can now navigate under surfaces open in the 3D view. And in the 2D, you can now see values from multiple sources in the tooltip, just like you can in HIP. So those are two things that people have been asking us to do in the last little while. So those are both delivered in BDB 4.1. We have added a new Save As tool in the Layers window, and that's quite a nifty little tool. What it does is if you have a raster surface or a raster image or a cloud data set open in the layers, you can right-click to save it to the CSAR format. Now that is really good, especially if you have some imagery and maybe a file format that's not very efficient, maybe doesn't do a great job of storing high resolution data, that sort of thing. You can now save that imagery right in the CSAR format, which is very performant and handles high volume data very, very nicely. You can see that here on the screen. I just right click on a source, say save as, and I get a CSAR file out, even if it was a geotiff or a bag or something else open in the layers tab. Another big one we have is we have embedded an ASCII info file editor in the application. Now, for those of you that bring in a lot of XYZ or ASCII file into the CSAR format, this is hopefully going to be really helpful to you. The ASCII info file is basically a file that lets the system know how to parse ASCII data in to build the grid or the cloud. I'll just open an existing one here. Sorry, I have to navigate to it. There. And that is just like it always was before. You set up how to parse in the XYZ, and then if you have extra columns to add in, you define what those extra columns are. And one of the really nice things now is that we have this preview window. So you can actually bring in your ASCII file and have a look at how it's formatted. And you can do things like figure out how many lines you have to skip for the header and what order the different columns of data are in. And you can do that interactively while setting up the info file. So we think this is going to make people's lives a lot easier, and you're always going to have a properly formed info file, which will be nice.
Another thing to note that in addition to our new info file editor, we've also made performance improvements to the point cloud import process. Now, these improvements are most noticeable when working with ASCII data, but they actually affect all the formats. And it also improved the loading time when loading point cloud data into the B2B server.
All right, we have one more thing to hit on here, and that is a new mechanism we put in place when exporting feature data out to GML. So I'm going to flip back again to the application and just give you a little look while I explain how this works. So for a few releases, we've been able to export features and attributes out to GML. And what we've done is put in place a support file that lets you register style sheets, so you can style that data on export. So you can create ASCII files this way, or different flavors of GML. So in the installation, we put in one style sheet for you to use, and that puts this selection to formatted ASCII menu item in place. But I added a couple extra custom ones myself, and they added new menu items. These are custom menu items to export selection to IFF format, which is a formatted ASCII, and selection to seabed ML, which is a flavor of GML used in the oil and gas industry to deliver data in their seabed survey data model, or SSDM. So these are custom ones I put in place. So this should really allow users to customize how they export feature geometry and attribution, kind of to suit the needs of their individual organization, without having to approach CARIS about putting new options into our ASCII export.
Now, one thing to note is you're not limited to just exporting different file formats. You could actually use this mechanism to, say, generate a report based on the selected features.
All right, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so as many of you know, BDB is often used in the chart feature compilation process. And as always, we included in this release some enhancements and fixes for that workflow. One of the big ones is the addition of the S57, S58 validation tests in Base Editor. So these are the validation tests that you would have had access to in HPD and in S57 Composer, so the chart production software systems. We moved the tests related to, feature geometry and some of the attribution tests into the validation window in Base Editor. And that's going to let you make sure that you're sending out contours with valid geometry and that sort of thing off to your chart production system. And remember, with those validation tests, you can always create your own set of custom tests. So if you, for example, are doing bathymetric ENC or BMIO production at a Base Editor, you could set up your own suite of validation tests to run against that data. So that's a long-standing request from some of our users. Some other areas where we made some improvements are in the depth area and contouring. Specifically, we kind of reworked the error messages that you get back to be a lot more explicit, so you can figure out maybe why a depth range value was not populated by the system and that sort of thing. And we also came up with a new method of resolving the depth ranges for isolations when you create depth areas from contours. So lots of new things in that area, and I suggest that you have a look through the changes list to get a full feeling of the extent of it. So a few other chart production or chart feature tools: the ability to ungroup sounding features, the ability to add inner rings to polygons. One of our most popular tools is our quick sounding creator. So that lets you pick a node on a grid or a point in a cloud and create a sounding feature from it directly. We've kind of opened that up, and you can now create any sort of point feature and automatically map the Z value from the node or the point to the height or depth on that feature. So you could pick a point and say create a pile from it, or a rack, or an obstruction, that sort of thing. Now, the other one that we're kind of excited about, and we want to show you through a little demo too, is the ability to import features directly from the HIPS file. So I'm going to close the data we have open, and I'm going to open a new session. And in this session, you see I have a HIPS file open. So this would be a HIPS file created in the HIPS and SIF software. And embedded in this HIPS file are some features. In this one, we have a track line, and we have a critical sounding. So this would be a critical sounding that was identified during processing. And by being able to open the HIPS file directly in Base Editor, we can transition this critical sounding right into an S57 feature with a couple clicks of the buttons. As well, if we wanted to move it out to a different data model like SSBM, we could just as easily do that. So all I need to do to move this into an S57 feature layer is go through the import selected objects and apply a mapping file that we have set up, and it's part of the deployment, to go from HIPS feature to S57. So very nice and clean. As well, we deployed in BDB 4.1 a mapping file to go from surface object in the database out to S57 objects like mcover or mqual, which is a workflow that a lot of our users do. And so we've kind of made that a lot easier. Now, if you look at the default mapping file, you might decide that you want something slightly different. Maybe you want to map the attributes differently or something like that, or map to a different feature. And you can certainly go and edit that mapping file to your heart's content. All right. On the B2B server side, the person administering the database is going to have a couple new tools at their disposal as well. So the two big ones are that we have new user role definitions, and this includes more granular set of roles and a brand new interface on it. And we did this because some organizations let us know that they needed more flexibility in assigning specific privileges to users. In particular, organizations that allow other organizations to access their Bathy database directly. So they really, really needed to control in finer detail what people could and couldn't do to the objects in the database. So that's part of B2B 4.1. And the other thing, which is pretty exciting, is that we have a brand new catalog editor for editing pools and profiles. So we just popped it up on the screen here. And what it lets you do is define attributes and objects in your pool. And then in the profile, it lets you assign the objects, the attributes to specific objects. So if I had a new custom attribute I wanted to add to my SURFAC object, I would just click add, go pick it out of the list, done. It can also be used to extend values in enumerated lists and that sort of thing. So we're trying to make it so you do not ever have to go and edit XML files again, that you can do it all through this nice dialog, and it will validate that your XML is properly formatted, and very hard to do anything that's not correct. So right now we're distributing this catalog editor through B2B server through the administration tools, but we do plan to distribute it through base editor as well in the coming months. It will be able to edit any of these pool and profile catalogs. And as well, we think this catalog editor is going to be around for a long time because we are setting it up to also be able to edit any kind of new styles of catalogs that may be coming either through different data models under S100, etc. So I think this is going to make people's lives a lot easier. There was also a number of fixes and improvements to the querying performance on very large databases. And by very large, I mean hundreds of thousands of raster and cloud data sets. So we kind of tweaked the querying to give a bit more optimized performance on those kinds of databases. Certainly, this was not a problem for very many of our clients, but we do have some people that have databases that large. All right, as a final item, we'd like to bring to your attention a couple new initiatives that we're providing for users. First, we have a new developer page to support our APIs, and we have reworked our user form. Mike's going to start off by telling you about the new developer site.
Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to a web browser that has our new developer site loaded. Now, this site we'll continue to add content to this site as we release new APIs and plugins and toolkits and that sort of thing. But right now, we're really interested in our CARIS Python API that we talked about earlier. Now, for anyone who has used our Python API that we released in previous versions, you'll notice that there is quite a bit more content now. So we have our B2B server module, and then our new coverage module is also listed here. So if we just take a quick look at the server module, we can see that we now have sections for tutorials, We have sample code explaining how to do different operations with the SDK. And then at the bottom we have our class documentation that we previously had. Now we're really hopeful that our users will share scripts and experiences with each other and really help drive this API. And to do that, we have set up our new forum, which Karen will give us a brief overview of.
All right, so you see at the top here, we've got a link to forums. I'm not sure if the link is live yet because we've been kind of redesigning this page, but in the coming days, this will go live. So we've had a BDB and HPD forum for a number of years now, but we really wanted to open that up and provide a forum for all our products. So you'll see on here that we've got HIPS and SIPs forum as well now. And like Mike mentioned, a Python API forums group as well. So the point here is that we wanted to provide some public open spaces where you didn't have to log in to read the content, but still have some content where you have to have a username and a login to access. So this will be going live very shortly, and we welcome everybody to come check it out at that time. Today's webinar was recorded, and it will be available for viewing on the CARIS YouTube channel, and we're on mediums like Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and all that stuff. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. The webinar will be held again next week in a time slot that works well for our European and Asian users. We'll be holding another set of webinars too that cover our new lots, limits, and boundaries solution, and that's going to be on December 10th and 11th, I guess. So if you're interested in that, please register and come check it out. All right, thank you for your attention, and take care.